Welcome everyone, here is Munir El-Azouzi from easymedicaldevice.com, and today we will have a live session, a LinkedIn live session, where we will talk specifically about economic operators. So I hope, there will be a lot of people that are coming to the live. If you are already on the live, so just drop me a comment just to say that you are here, and then we can start. With the different questions. I have also Erik Vollebregt on the background. Okay, Erik is here. Your sound is okay, Erik, I think.
I hope so.
Yeah, I hope so too. So thank you for joining. Just trying to see now if everything is okay on the connection. So 23 people, 24, it starts to grow, so it's great. So as I've said, Erik, so today we'll talk about economic operators. And we'll try to really explain to people the roles and responsibilities of economic operators. We have collected already some questions from people that were asking that. So that, I hope it covers everything. But in case you still have some questions, don't hesitate to put that on the comments. I will try to see them if my phone is working, because I don't see anything for now. And if there is any comments, so you can also please provide those comments, and I will also pass that to Erik if he doesn't see that. Okay, Erik, so are you ready for it?
I am ready.
Questions and answers. Erik, I have some questions. Some questions, you know them already because we discussed about them. Some questions are new for you, so let's see if you can answer to them, because I received a question from people until the last minute. So let's try to answer to that. Okay, the first question is about economic operators agreements. So do you need to update your your agreements now, or can you wait to the end of the transition period? I suppose it's more about products that are under MDD. So should people already update them with the MDR requirements, or can they wait until the end of the transition period?
Well, to make a silly joke, I would say it depends on whether you're Chuck Norris or not, because Chuck Norris can update his agreements at the end of the transitional period and take no time whatsoever.
Yeah, true.
Right? We've all seen him do it. So the problem is that, of course, if you wait until the end of the transitional period, the longer you wait, the less time you have. And as a lawyer, I always experience the cases where you think this is going to be a done deal. This is easy to negotiate, for example. And if it's an agreement that you are going to implement in your own quality system or in your own quality agreement set within your corporate group, for example, because you own the distributor, you own the importer, no problem, you can wait until the end of the transitional period. But if you're going to have to negotiate the agreement with a third party, then you'd better not wait until the end of the transitional period, right? It's a bit like you wait with doing your homework until the evening before, and then your computer fails or something.
Yeah, so the student syndrome, where we are waiting until the end to do everything. But as you said, here we have this, it's an agreement, so everybody should agree on what you have to do. There is some companies that will maybe take the opportunity when they are updating this agreement to integrate more things inside or to remove things, etc. But at the end, I never saw an agreement signed within 1 week. It's more like 6 months, 7 months, 8 months. So because there is always some questions, some comments, some change me this word, change me this dot. So it's a bit, not something easy sometimes.
And there's also one more thing. If you have an MDR audit before the end of the transitional period, the notified body will want to see that everything is in the state that it's going to have to be. So if you tell them in an audit, this is completely non-compliant, but it will be before the end of the transitional period, that's not going to work, because then they'll say, well, we need to know what it's going to be now, because otherwise we can't complete the audit on this point, and we're going to give you a non-conformity.
Yeah, agree. So please update your agreement as soon as possible so that you can do, and don't use the transition period as an excuse to say, oh, we can do that later. Okay, next one. as you've said, yeah, this is also economic operators in a big company. So we have a lot of multinationals that do have do have entities that are acting as an economic operator. Like you have big companies that have a manufacturer plus a distributor on it, or if they are outside of Europe, they also have their own office as an authorized representative, etc., etc. So is there any difference if I am a multinational with economic operators within my quality management system, or if I use third parties?
Well, I think if you look at the MDR doesn't make a difference, because the MDR just has one set of rules that applies to both situations. But the way you implement economic operators in your company just makes a huge difference. Because, for example, there is, if you have the economic operators in your own corporate group, then you can tie everything together with the use of quality system procedures, if your quality system extends to those economic operators, or with quality agreements. Whereas if you are dealing with a third party, then they will probably be, it will probably be more difficult to agree things on, for example, let's say the distributor has their own obligation to notify the authorities in case of a serious incident that is also a really big health risk. Still, as a manufacturer, you would like to be informed about these things, so you can put that in the agreement. But if you're dealing with your own economic operator, then you can say, you always have to tell me before you call the authorities.
Okay.
You are going to try and agree that with a external third party, not so easy, because they will say no, because if we have to wait for you, then we might be late, and then we're in trouble with the authorities. And another difference, I think, that makes a lot of difference with the use of third parties is that if you look at the way Articles 13 and 14 work, and then compared to the manufacturer, is they're a bit like Russian dolls, right? The manufacturer is the biggest doll, then the importer is the smaller doll, and then the distributor is the smallest doll. Now, what you, maybe people that have seen presentations of mine about economic operators, they will know the model with the overlaps between the different entities. And these overlaps, of course, if you have the economic operators in your own corporate group, these overlaps you want to manage because you don't want to duplicate them. So what you can do if you're a manufacturer with economic operators in your own group, you can sort of set up a central, almost a resource center from which you can manage the responsibilities for the different economic operators. And there is some art and some skill to how you should do this. For people that are interested in that, Agnes Schlobel-Schley from Philips Healthcare and me wrote an article about that in Rap Focus end of last year, which basically describes how all of this works in a multinational company, how you can do this resource sharing. And that is based on, for example, how Philips does that themselves, or at least thinks it can do it themselves, and also how I know that other clients of mine do this. So that would be an interesting thing to look at, and we can also include the link to that article in the show notes.
Yeah, I think it's part of one of the episodes that we have done together. So, or you can go to this and to check the show notes there, or I can try to put that on the show notes for this episode.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, great. So next one, it's a quick one that I received this afternoon. So who can become an economic operator? This is a question that a lot of people are asking me, because who can become, for example, authorized representative, who can become importer, who can become this and that. So what is your opinion on that?
Well, first of all, I think it's a really good question, because it shows that the logistic company is thinking about things, which I think is really good. can a logistic company in Europe become an authorized representative and an importer? Well, this is a question where, as lawyer, I'm going to always play the "it depends" card. And it depends on whether you want to become either of these two roles. And also, it is, if you ask it in the way, can I become one role or the other, that's not really how the economic operator system works. And that's something I have to clarify a lot. So I'll start with that, because an authorized representative you can become, so to speak, because you can agree with the manufacturer, I will be your authorized representative. You give me a mandate and I do this. That's how an authorized representative works. So you can become an authorized representative, but you can't become an importer by being appointed, as it were, because an importer is any entity that fits the definition of being importer. So then, in order to see if you're an importer, you would need to be the first entity established in the union to place medical devices on the market. And that's not something, well, you could say, well, that's something you can assign somebody to do because of the way the agreement with the importer works, but legally you can't appoint somebody to be your importer. So it's an important difference between the two. Now, as a logistic company, do I want to become an authorized representative? Well, I would say if you really like risk and administration and you have a very good liability insurance, I would say by all means, go for it. You have my blessing. Why would you not want to do this? Because, and I think we also discussed that in one of the previous podcasts, is authorized representatives have become much more regulated under the MDR. And not only have they become much more regulated in the sense that they have to monitor compliance of the manufacturer, so you need to be equipped as an authorized representative to monitor compliance of the manufacturer. So basically know just as well as the manufacturer what a compliant device looks like, basically. So that's one. And also, we've got this crazy Article 11, Section 5 in the MDR that says an authorized representative, you are jointly and severally liable with the manufacturer for product liability damage if the manufacturer was not compliant. So if you like some risk, if you are like the Evel Knievel of importers or logistic companies, by all means become an authorized representative. But I think there are really good reasons not to be an authorized representative, and probably your existing liability insurance will not cover this.
One thing also that maybe we can talk about is the fact that the manufacturer, what risk does it take if he appoints the same entity as importer and authorized representative?
Yeah, good question as well, because that leads to a situation where the authorized representative has to check compliance of the manufacturer. The importer also has to do that to a certain extent. But what you basically do is if you make the importer and the authorized representative the own entity, the same entity, then you've basically given your importer the keys to your house, right? Yeah. Because your importer has basically has gotten you completely captive. Why? Because the authorized representative has to be labeled on your label of your products. And not only that, the authorized representative also has to monitor if you're compliant. Well, this is not always the way you want to work with an external importer, because a logistics company, no manufacturer will own their own logistics company, in my experience. So it would basically mean that from the logistics company, you would be in a comfortable situation because you would have a captive customer. If you have a manufacturer that is, let's say, tricked into this situation, there will be a very difficult discussion when there's an issue, because there's a nasty surprise. Because as soon as you say as an importer, well, I don't like what you're doing to me as an importer, so I'm going to terminate the authorized representative contract. That's kind of weird. And the manufacturer needs an authorized representative in order to be on the market. And if you terminate the contract as authorized representative, then he has to stop placing things on the market until they have a new authorized representative.
Yeah, so it's avoiding to put all your eggs in the same basket. If there is an issue with an importer, then you have maybe to change also all your packaging, because you have to remove the names of the authorized representative on it, and you have to change a lot of things. So it can cost you a lot of money also. And yeah, avoiding to have all the eggs on the same basket can be really helpful for everybody here.
Well, and then there's also the problem that other authorized representatives do not want to work with the manufacturer anymore, because you've been terminated by one, and they will think you are a non-compliant manufacturer, so they don't want to work with you.
Yeah, true.
And this representative can even make it more terrible by just putting word out in the market that better not work with this manufacturer, because they're an untrustworthy bunch of non-compliant idiots. And then you will just not get an authorized representative. Yeah,
so I think you have really to be careful here when you are choosing that. It's also what I recommend. I made an article on authorized representatives. If you want to go to check that, it was the 11 questions, the top 11 questions of authorized representative, and one of them was, should I choose the same importer and authorized representative? And my answer is mainly no, because of all the issues that we discussed today.
Unless you like complexity and risk.
Yeah. Okay, just looking now if there is some comments. So yeah, hello everybody. Hello Romuald, Teresa, hello. Risha Julian is also here. Risha will discuss about UDAMED, so wait a bit. We'll have also UDAMED discussion about economic operators. Okay, let's go. Let's focus now on Article 16 of the MDR and IVDR. So I will also mention the two articles, because what is applicable for MDR is also applicable for IVDR, so don't also separate them. First question, so taking into account the law principle according to which more restrictive conditions cannot be imposed on distributors than the manufacturers, we consider that transitional provision of MDR 120, Article 120 or Article 110 for IVDR are applicable also for the distributor obligation. In any other interpretation, we will have a distinctive and unproportionate system in which manufacturer will have a more favorable regime in comparison with the distributors. Please let us know what is the interpretation of this aspect, that you consider proper and in accordance with the wording of the regulation, as well as the principle of law and the principle established in the Treaty on European Union. Okay, it was a long question, but mainly the question is, we have a lot of restriction on we have some laws that applies to manufacturers, and regarding the transition period, transition provision, so Article 120, is this also applicable to distributors, or they have to apply some of the MDR without this transition period?
Somebody is evidently ambitious to become a lawyer if you pose a question like that. So
okay.
Crazy, but yeah, I mean, this is it's a good question, and it's also a difficult question, because it's a question as to consistency, and I agree with the presumption of if we would interpret it one way or the other, things would become inconsistent. So let's answer this question from let's say from the top down in a couple of different scenarios. So what we know for sure is that the distributor obligations apply when the MDR applies. So products that are fully under the MDR, no question that the distributor provisions apply. So that's one. Then, of course, the question mentions Article 120. So what kind of products do we have under Article 120? Legacy devices. And then the question is, do the obligations of distributors apply to legacy devices? Because for manufacturers, you could argue that, because we are working with legacy devices, Article 120, Section 3 says the only obligations that you have in Chapter 2, the part of the MDR and the IVDR that is about economic operators, that's registration of economic operators and of devices.
Yeah.
So then the question is, but hey, does that apply with exclusion of the other obligations for the manufacturer? It's a good question, but put a pin in it for the moment. So that's how it applies for the manufacturer. Question is then, and that's what this question is really about, if it doesn't apply for the manufacturer, does it apply for the distributor? Right?
Yeah.
And I completely agree with the way this question is phrased, that it would be an inconsistent result. And the fact that I'm making this very long-winded approach to this question, that also shows that this is not a question that has been answered explicitly in guidance yet. So that also means that we are very much in it depends territory. So I would say that as a distributor or as an importer, as an economic operator, you can definitely say, depending on how you interpret the regime that applies to the manufacturer for the devices, that same regime should apply to the economic operators downstream as well. Because otherwise you get into the weird situation that, for example, an importer would need to apply MDR provisions, while the manufacturer is working under the MDD for distribution, which is weird. So I think we would definitely need consistency there. But then you go to the $100 million question. What does that mean? Does it mean that after the date of application, for all devices, so both the MDR governed devices and the transitional regime governed legacy devices, do the economic operator obligations apply in both cases? Because we know they apply to the MDR governed devices, but do they also apply to these others? That is, by the letter of the way Article 120 Section 3 was worded, it's not clear. But it would be kind of weird to say, well, then we are going to extract this, we're going to take out these devices from the economic operator obligations completely. That would be weird. On the other hand, you could also say, well, that's exactly what the intention was. But we don't know yet.
So it's mainly a question of interpretation. You can have a competent authority or an auditor from a notified body coming and having its own interpretation of this, and it can ask something specific for this company, and another notified body or competent authority can ask something else for another company.
Exactly, and I can already imagine that some of the attendees of this webinar are almost getting a crying fit at the moment, because this is truly one of the big questions that has been unanswered until the very last moment. I can tell you, I've asked this to a competent authority, and the competent authority said, yes, everything in Chapter 2 applies unless explicitly delayed under Article 123. 123 is the article that provides which parts of the MDR are delayed in certain cases, like Richard, UDEMET, right? Yeah. And also a bunch of other provisions. So that competent authority said, no, everything, because we asked explicitly, does it mean that that certain parts of the economic operator provisions are applicable? And that authority said, yes, this is, unless it's explicitly delayed under Article 123, it is it is not delayed and immediately applicable. That's one way to look at it, which I've validated with one competent authority. On the other hand, there are also companies that say, no, that's not how you should actually read Article 120, Section 3, because Article 123, Section 3 explicitly says that it is intended to create an exception to Article 5, which is the core article of the MDR that says every device placed on the market has to be in conformity with this regulation. Now then you get into this whole sort of spiraling circular reasoning thing, because the directives that have been that we're applying have been repealed, except insofar as they are necessary for the application of Article 120. So the directives have been repealed, but they have been resuscitated for the purpose of these 4 years. So basically you're dealing with zombified directives. And then the question is, do these directives function by themselves, or do they function within the scope of the MDR? And that's something you can set an enormous amount of legal reasoning free on. But I have not seen anybody so far, and that's because this is also a landmine of a question, nobody wants to touch it. And that's why it is conspicuously absent in, for example, CAMD FAQs. They're not saying anything about this, except that the interpretation of this competent authority that I told you about is consistent with the other things they say in the FAQ. So this is really one where you, as a company, you need to really count your fingers, I would say, decide what kind of risk you want to take, and preferably, I would just call the competent authority of your authorized representative, or if you're based in the union, call your own competent authority and say, look, how does this work? Because it's unclear. And then go with that, because then at least if somebody's going to enforce against you, you can say, I've asked and I have good reason to believe because they told me. But it's an excellent question, because it goes to the core of one of the big unanswered questions of the MDR. And I mean, I've advised clients about these things, and I've just had to say, look, I don't know.
That's clear. I think it's really clear. It's really a question of interpretation. It's a question of European Commission.
Going to the casino, you put everything on black, or you put everything on red, and then make a good assessment about which is the more sensible choice. And of course, you can limit risks in those regards by, if you are going to comply with the MDR from the start, of course, then you run a lot less risk than if you're going to defer it. So that's
just one thing. So there was this MDCG guidance that was out recently about a transition period. So nothing was mentioned specifically on that, I suppose.
Otherwise, it would have been in capital block letters in the blog that I wrote about it.
Okay. Yeah, true. That also, please also go to the blog of Erik Vollebregt. There is a lot of information there. So medicaldevicelegals.com, is it that one?
Yeah, that's right.
Great. Erik, great. So I have other questions on the chat. Just wanted to do that. So Richard Julian is just saying, or just for the previous thing, that in UDAMED, authorized representative can already cancel the mandate with the manufacturer and vice versa easily. So apparently there is a function also on UDAMED to do that, even if UDAMED will be live in 2 years. So let's see that. There is a question here.
I'm just looking at the guidance just to be sure that I didn't make a terrible fuck up on this question, but no, they don't say anything about it, because basically the only thing they say about it is that if you are going to go into this transitional regime, this is what you need to do. They don't say you are in this transitional regime if this happens. That's just not what they're saying.
Okay. No, I think it's clear. Okay, so a question from William Maggie. The question is, my question is, how far must the manufacturer go to ensure all economic operators are compliant with the medical device regulation? Are the manufacturer expected to potentially audit EOs? So we had already answered this question also on the podcast, but if I remember, the answer was no. There is no need for them to do any check because mainly, I mean, there is a check, but mainly it's a competent authorities, as we said, that has this responsibility to verify that they are applying the MDR.
There's two aspects to this. There's the MDR itself that says every economic operator has their own responsibilities. And then there's the ISO 13485 standard that says you need to control your supply chain to a certain extent.
Exactly.
And I would say on the second part, so the ISO obligations, nothing changes. Whereas on the MDR, each economic operator has their own responsibilities, and the MDR does not impose a direct obligation on you to control them. Because actually the MDR does rather the opposite. It says, okay, distributor, if you see this, then you must do that. Importer, if you see this, you must do that. It doesn't say the manufacturer must ensure that the importer does this or that. That's completely not how the MDR is set up.
Yeah, I have then the second question that is mainly related to that. It's Agnieszka Piaskowska, who said, shall all economic operators be approved on an approved supplier list, including distributors?
That would be an ISO issue.
Exactly.
But not an MDR issue. The MDR is completely agnostic to that.
Yeah, great.
And of course, if the ISO standard is going to be harmonized against the MDR, which is quite likely, then this will become an MDR requirement that way.
Okay, that's a good point here. Other question: if we should not choose an importer as our authorized representative, who should you suggest as an authorized representative?
Well,
everybody else.
all my friends that are authorized representatives. Now, seriously, who should you consider? That depends as a company what you are looking for. I will and let me run down the options. Of course, there's always the option to have an authorized representative that's completely independent, like the consultancy style authorized representative, right?
Yeah.
There are a lot of really good ones, and for example, it could be an explicit goal of yourself as a manufacturer to contract in experience, regulatory experience with your authorized representative. Well, in that case, there's several really good big authorized representatives in Europe. There's the EAAR, the European Authorized Representative Association. These are all authorized representatives that have a lot of experience and that can actually advise you on regulatory compliance and what to do. So if that's the kind of representation that you need, then you should go for it. On the other hand, if you want an authorized representative just because you must, then you can also set up your own. There's absolutely nothing that prevents you as a manufacturer to just open a legal entity, set up a legal entity in the union, and then task that, then mandate that entity to be your authorized representative. The only problem is that the MDR imposes a lot more requirements on it than the medical devices directives used to do. So you need to properly outfit the authorized representative then. And also, you've got yourself a legal entity in your group that has become an enormous European bullseye for product liability claims. So if you are naughty, then as a manufacturer, then you can't just run away because you've got this authorized representative there.
You have not to forget also that you have to appoint also a PRRC for your authorized representative. So you have also to have somebody there. It's not just commercial people that are just selling your products in the region, but you also people that are knowledgeable in quality and regulatory affairs.
Yeah. it's not like you could just set up your own letterbox legal entity. No, it really has to amount to something, and the expertise has to be there. So there's all kinds of options in that regard.
Great.
And
okay,
what you can also do is there's also an intermediate form where you set up your own legal entity, but then you contract in the expertise of the authorized representative, because you just mentioned, Monier, the PRC. I mean, the PRC at an authorized representative can also be contracted in. So that's also a way to do it as a manufacturer. So it's a bit of a Lego blocks situation, I think, where you can build the kind of Lego thing that you like.
Yeah.
Like the Millennium Falcon, for example, or just yesterday I saw in a store an Imperial Star Destroyer of Lego. Immense thing, very beautiful, but takes some time to build.
Yeah. So if you have then to choose somebody that is really professional, that has also some good background and some expertise on that, or open your own office in Europe, but don't forget also that there are more things to do than just opening an office, so that you are really ready for placing your products on the market. And you have also to have an importer, so you have your importer in one side and the authorized representative in the other side. Okay, let's come back to the questions again. So we have a question about Article 16, competent authority requirements. So I think we answered a bit about this one. So can a competent authority impose some certification standards? Because apparently for people that are applying the Article 16, they have to have a quality management system in place. But can the member state impose you to have an ISO 13485 for distributors? Impose a different standard. So can it be something that they have the rights to do?
Yeah, that's a really nice, interesting question too, because one of the MDR and the IVDR regulate economic operators, but they do not regulate them exhaustively. And the MDR and the IVDR say explicitly member states are still allowed to have national requirements for distributors and importers, for distribution activity going on their own territory. Like, for example, in Spain and Portugal and Belgium, I believe you need to notify yourself as a distributor to the competent authorities. And you may need to also show that you have capabilities with regard to storage and so on. This is something that the MDR is agnostic to. There's explicitly an article in the MDR that says member states can still have their own requirements. And especially when it comes to quality system requirements, yes, competent authority can impose on distributors that they have a specific quality system. But then you get into the, because if you're interested in reading about that, the HPRA, the Irish Competent Authority, they issued a fantastic guidance document on good distribution practices for medical devices, where they also discuss the use of a quality system, for example, and what the HPRA's expectations are in that regard. So member states definitely do have competence there. But then the question goes to, well, but how about Article 16, Section 3, points A and B? Can a member state regulate that as well? There I would say no, because this is something that has been exclusively occupied or harmonized by European law. That's how that works. So that means that a member state cannot basically form their own view of what they would like in terms of quality system there. You would need to go with an interpretation of what is required under Article 16, Section 3. So the member state may say, if you do this, then I don't think that you meet the requirements of Article 16, Section 3 and 4. Because that's how market surveillance works under the MDR. But the member state cannot say, you must have this particular quality system in order to meet this obligation. Because We don't know. So they can try it, but you could always contest it because the MDR is not clear on this point until the MDCG issues guidance or there's a case and a judgment of the European Court of Justice.
So mainly here, as we said, the Article 16.3 is also regarding the fact that we are excluding from the role of manufacturer the fact to translate the documentation that they receive from manufacturer, plus the repackaging in case it's needed. This is not really something that is specific to a medical device company. It's something that can be done specifically. I mean, it's also something that can be covered by an ISO 9001 or something like that. And we are saying also that the ISO standard is not kind of an obligation, it's voluntary, even if we know that ISO 13485 is really highly recommended for medical device companies. So if I'm going for an ISO 9001 and I'm covering really the requirements of translation and of repackaging for the devices that I'm receiving, is it fine?
The question is whether you can actually do this under an ISO 9001 certificate from a certification body. Because if you read Article 16, Section 4, that says that you have to submit to the competent authority a certificate
issued by
a notified body, not any certification body, a notified body designated for the type of devices that are subject to the activities. So that means that if I am going to call me stupid, but if I read these letters literally, then I think if let's say, for example, I'm going to translate the instructions for use of pacemakers, why not? And let's take something completely risk-free. I mean, what could go wrong with translation of a pacemaker manual, right? It's only a book as thick as an old phone book. And for the millennials, that's one of these things we used to have. It was like this thick. You could actually stop bullets with it.
Yeah.
And all the phone numbers of everybody would be in there. Go figure. Now, so I'm going to translate this. Then, I mean, if you read the MDR explicitly, it says then you need a certificate from a notified body accredited for pacemakers. So not any certification body, a notification body, not any notified body, a notified body accredited for pacemakers. Otherwise, the certificate would not meet the requirements of Article 16.4, I think. And that makes it, I think, makes it a small group of notified bodies you can go to.
But the one thing is important here. We are talking about the distributor. So a distributor is not distributing just one kind of product. So should we appoint many notified bodies in that case?
Or appoint a notified body with a really broad scope.
Yeah.
Or find a competent authority that is willing to interpret this criterion very loosely. But then you might run into problems with competent authorities in other member states where they will say, yeah, but hey, I don't like this translation because it's not happen. It didn't happen pursuant to a certificate by a notified body accredited for pacemakers. So that's literally in the law, and that's I can't read it otherwise. Of course, you have to realize that I'm a manufacturer's lawyer, so this is a very manufacturer-centric interpretation. I'm very much conditioned to that.
Yeah.
Apologies, full disclosure.
Yeah.
And I've actually had cases against distributors for translating things this way. But really, I mean, I am still waiting for a good argument that notified body means any certification body, because it's just not what it says. And designated for the type of devices that are subject to the activities. Yeah, I think it's pretty clear criteria.
Yeah, I think it's really clear. And we have another question about notified bodies just after. I think we have next one. Next one is mainly about the quality management system. I think we also talked about that. Is it an ISO 13485 certification or a completely separate certification issued specifically for live for this purpose. So yeah, it's mainly what we talked about. We are here talking also about not specifically the action of translating or of repackaging, is the action of knowing the product that we are working with, to have this specific elements regarding the notified body that is checking the product if all the elements or environment is in place for delivering the right product on the market.
I mean, theoretically, what you could do, and I think that's because if I go back to the HPRA guidance that I just mentioned, the good distribution practices for devices, the HPRA says in that guidance, we think it's a very good idea if you are a distributor and you distribute lots of different medical devices. An ISO 13485 certification for your activities would be a fantastic idea, really good idea. We would applaud that. But, so that is definitely a good thing to do. And if you regularly, I would say, translate IFUs of a large, let's say, scope of medical devices, what I would do is I would define the scope as distributor. I would go to a notified body accredited for these devices. So I would check in Nando for the scope of their accreditation. I would go, so does that fit my requirements? I go to the notified body and I say, look, can you give me a quality system certificate under ISO 13485 for translation of this scope of these activities? So maybe even certify my whole quality system, but please look specifically at my translation procedures. And then put on the certificate, this is an ISO 13485 certification with specific attention to Article 16, 3, and 4.
Yeah, I think it's a good point here.
And I've actually, it was quite funny because when the MDR just came out in the IVDR, there were notified bodies that said, yeah, we're not going to do this because we don't know against which standards we need to certify. Right? Because there is no guidance that says, or no standard that says, there is no standard for translation of IFUs. So we don't know what to certify against. I thought that was a bit, let's say, not so helpful. Because if you look at the general quality system certification, I mean, of course, a notified body looks at your translation procedures. If you're a manufacturer and you want a quality system certification, a notified body looks at your translation processes and procedures. Yeah. So what's the problem to do that for distributors as well? I don't see the problem. So a notified body could do that for a distributor as well, but just be explicit and say on the certificate, hey, I looked at this with specific attention, so the distributor can use the quality system certificate for this purpose.
Yeah, there is also the question here about class 1 products. So class 1 products don't need a notified body. So if I'm distributing class 1 products, do I need also to follow all this?
Yes.
Okay, so it's the same answer.
It's the problem is, of course, is that you can also say differently. You can also say, well, there is no notified body designated for this type of devices because they are class 1 products. So that means I don't need to follow this procedure, right? That's another way to look at it. That's an interpretational way to solve it. But this is one of these things where you can see that the clause was drafted with higher risk products in mind. And there's a lot of these provisions in the MDR where you think like, okay, if I look at it with the glasses of this risk class on, then it makes perfect sense. But if I look at it with the glasses of this risk class on, then it makes no sense at all. So that means that in this case, yeah, I mean, probably you could say, well, it's there is no notified body for this group of products, so I can't get a certificate from them, so I don't need it. But then, if that's the way you're going to go, better have good rationale for that in your quality system. Because, of course, there will be nasty people like me that will try and contest what you've done. And then
it's clear. So still have a quality anyway. So for class 1, a manufacturer should still have a quality management system. And here we are talking about the activity for translating and repackaging. So anyway, you should have a good activity related to that. So having a procedures for that and quality management system is important also to be sure that what you are distributing on the market is still compliant and still follows the requirements of the manufacturer.
No,
okay.
We have a quality system.
Does the Commission consider the uniform interpretation of the MDR by the competent authorities in member state in order to create a different legal regime and a different application for each member state? So we talked also about that, the fact that the MDR is also opening the door to the member states to have some local laws.
Yeah, well, there's that. Of course, there's the places that the MDR explicitly says that that member states are allowed to diverge, because also the MDR is not full harmonization. And for example, the second-hand sale of medical devices explicitly excluded, right? Just an example. So. But on the other hand, what you see in the medical devices regulation is that if you look at chapter 8, so that's articles 101 and following, it literally says cooperation between member states. So what you see is that the MDR also sets up this whole cooperation structure, which is supposed to be a next level application of the old medical devices expert group system that we had, where basically, you would have all these ad hoc groups that would sort of cooperate, and then industry would be half involved and half not. And now with the MDCG, they've made it much more formalized. So it means that member states will be much more uniform in the way they enforce the regulation. Actually, there's even, with regard to market surveillance, for example, there's a mechanism that member states have to submit their enforcement plans annually, so everybody has an idea of what's happening. To wheel out UDEMET again, there's a module in UDEMET on market surveillance, which I think is actually the last module to be delivered right now.
Yeah.
But so you can expect a lot more coordination and cooperation between the member states. On the other hand, we are still not at a stage of full harmonization. That's what we also see now in the whole COVID-19 crisis, which we are going to have a discussion about, you and I and some others next week.
Yeah.
There is no full harmonization in the sense that we have a European Commission that can do anything like the FDA, for example, and just say we take this measure, because that's not how the EU is set up. So, as the European Court of Justice said in the Lico-Santre case, harmonization is not complete at that point under the Medical Devices Directive, and also under the MDR, harmonization is still not fully complete. So we will always have differences, but the mechanisms to address the differences and the mechanisms to harmonize potential differences, those have become much better.
Yeah, I agree with you. So we are not anymore directive; it's a regulation. So there is more uniformity, but still some kind of small differences still exist. Are there any information available regarding the European Commission to consider postponing the Article 16 of the EU MDR coming into force or other provision? I think the answer is no.
Well, I should be careful there, I think, because...
Really?
Yeah. And I will tell you why.
Okay.
There's been a lot of chatter in the market about moving the date of application of the MDR, right?
Yeah.
I mean, how many clients didn't you have that asked you, when are they going? This is going to be a mess. Why don't they just move the date of application? And you tell them, like, well, it's not that simple, because the Commission is not the FDA. They don't have this ability. And if we want to move the date of application, we need to go through the legislative procedure for the MDR. That will take a couple of months. And if we do this, then we are afraid that the Parliament or member states in the Council will come with additional amendments, which will slow down the change procedure even more. So it's very hard to reopen, let's say, the text of the medical devices regulation by changing anything in it. I mean, we were able to get away with 2 corrigenda, in which I think they try to sneak in some changes that, especially the second corrigendum, I think it's a bit of a disgrace constitutionally. As a lawyer, I'm like, oh my God, they should totally have gone through the legislative procedure, but okay, it was for the best, so let's let this one slide. But as far as I know, there is no specific idea or plan to postpone any of the individual provisions of the MDR, like Article 16. But. Okay, so we had this Commission recommendation this week about COVID-19, right?
Yeah.
And I've just written a blog about it, which I think the people that ask this question will think is very interesting, because what this recommendation does is this recommendation says to the member states, dear member states, we as Commission recommend that in these difficult times when things are becoming a total mess, you should consider laying off on the administrative barriers to getting useful medical devices to the market. That's essentially what they say.
Okay.
You can do that by 2 ways. You can do that by being more lenient with regard to conformity assessment, and you can do it by doing intelligent market surveillance. So, for example, with regard to conformity assessment, what you can do is you can point to particular devices that are not compliant, of which the conformity assessment procedure doesn't bring to a CE mark. And that's the Article 59 procedure. Then you can take a decision, then you tell the Commission, and then the Commission can roll out this decision to a European-wide decision under Article 59 of the MDR. Fantastic. But that's not going to help you if you are a distributor that is, for example, faced with a situation where you have a nasty person like me saying, you are translating instructions for use without a certificate from a notified body designated for these activities. So that's illegal. Now, you could, that's free advice, worth a lot of money probably, and I'll regret it later if somebody's using it against me in a court case for a client. But anyway, for the sake of argumentation, there is another procedure which nobody really talks about a lot, but I think this recommendation refers to indirectly. That's the Article 97, Section 3 procedure, which is the other non-compliance procedure under market surveillance. And that says that if you, as a member state, come across a device in the market that is non-compliant for reasons not having to do anything with safety, and so the safety profile of the device is acceptable, then you can also decide not to take action, notify the Commission, and then the Commission can take an implementing act to say, in all of these cases, for these types of devices, the member states will not take action. Fantastic procedure. I think it's one of the hidden gems in the MDR. And that could typically be one of the procedures that could work for an Article 16 scenario, where as distributors, for example, you would be able to convince a member state to say, well, we are not going to apply Article 16.4 in the sense that you need a notified body accredited for this, designated for this particular scope, for this particular product.
So as you said, it's really a member state that should accept your arguments and then say, yes, I authorize that. But will this have an impact on the other member states, or is it just applicable to this one?
No, it has a huge impact on the other member states, because this is the way that the MDR works. You first, for the Article 59 procedure and the Article 97 Section 3 procedure, you first need one member state to take an official decision, then ring to the Commission and say, hey, we've got this great idea. Shouldn't we roll this out for the rest of Europe? And then the Commission will look at it and they'll think like, oh yeah, fantastic idea. We are going to draft an implementing act. Then this goes through the comitology procedure that will lead to an adoption of an implementing act, and then it's binding for the whole EU.
So yeah, everybody has then to apply what is accepted by one member state, and so it's really the member state who is really leading the discussion here.
No, that's not how the comitology procedure works, because the member states are really clever in the way they allowed the MDR to be drafted, or the way comitology works, because even if there's an implementing act that goes into the comitology procedure, every member state and the European Parliament can still oppose the measure.
Okay.
That means that basically a measure can only go through the comitology procedure if everybody agrees.
Okay, but does it mean also that only one member state can apply a rule and the others will not?
Currently, yes, because member states still have their own market surveillance policies. So it might be, for example, that one member state will be viciously enforcing Article 16.4 and will just fine every distributor that does not have a certificate granted by a notified body, so not any certification body, but a notified body designated for the scope, whereas other member states are going to say, well, we don't think this is very important, so we are not going to do anything about this. Yeah, that's completely possible.
Okay, so yeah, there is also some kind of difference that can happen. So be careful on that, and really contact your competent authority to know exactly what is its position and see if you can have good arguments to change that. Okay, next one is more about notified body bottleneck.
Yeah.
Notified body are not replying, so I want to have this certification or this ISO 13485 for my Article 16, but they are not replying to me, or they are not talking to me, or they are not. Yeah, how can I do now?
Yeah, that's problematic, because not only distributors are in this boat, but also manufacturers. And if you look at the priority list of notified bodies at the moment, or let's say until a month ago, that was first doing all the recertifications for soft transition certificates, so recertification of AI, MDD, and MDD certificates. That was their priority. Almost no MDR certificates were even issued. And even then, as a manufacturer, you were lucky if your notified body would even pick up the phone when you called them. And if you had a disagreement with them, they would just put you on the bottom of the pile, or they would say, and I've literally heard clients say that the notified body would just say in meetings, well, if you're not happy, then you can just change notified body. Of course, knowing full well that no notified body is taking new customers. So manufacturers are completely captive. Now, then there's also the distributors that also have something that they want. And the problem is that if you look at the MDR and also the whole system of notified bodies, and I think personally as a lawyer, I think that the legal recourse that you have if you have a dispute with a notified body is pretty bad, because there's not much you can do. And that means that basically the only option that you have as a distributor is to complain to the designating authority for the notified body and say, look, I want to work with this notified body, and they don't even answer the phone. And then it really depends on the notified body, on the competent authority, what they will do. I've had very good experiences with the MHRA, for example, where you would call your contact person at the MHRA and say, this notified body does this or that, and within a day it would be fixed. And there's also competent authorities that do nothing. I have really bad experiences with the Norwegians. They will just go like, meh. With our notified body, meh.
Okay, so just one thing that we discussed also together related to maybe that is the fact that you need to have a notified body for your products. Can you use still some notified bodies that are just MDD accredited?
Well, that's not a good question, because then you go into the interpretation what designated for these devices means. And I would say if you are dealing with MDR devices, they need to be designated under the MDR.
But if it is MDD device, if we are still under MDD devices that we are trying to distribute in the meantime, and we need to have this. And as we've said, we don't know if the manufacturer is maybe under a transition period, but maybe the distributor has to apply still some elements. So
we have the problem, of course, that the MDR says that all designations pursuant to the MDD and the AMDD are void by end of May 2020. So you could never go to another notified body than the notified body designated for the specific, then the notified body responsible for the surveillance of the MDD certificate. I mean, that's a notified body where you could still say, well, at least that still has a zombified designation, right?
Yeah.
But you can't go to another one because I mean, you can't go to a notified body that's not a notified body anymore.
Yeah, true.
Right? Yeah.
But after date of application, MDD accreditation are not applicable anymore.
No.
No, but I mean, you cannot receive a new MDD certificate after the date of application. This is what we mean.
That's correct. Yeah.
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 So that all the certificates that are on the market is okay, and from this date, the notified bodies that are just MDD accredited are, as you said, zombie notified bodies.
That's a bit of a stupid word, but I think it really it describes what is happening, because these notified bodies, even though all the designations are repealed, they are allowed to continue surveillance for the certificates that they historically issued.
Okay.
Right? So that's how it works. So I mean, if you are going to make an argument that Article 16.4 would apply to MDD devices, and you need an MDD accredited notified body for that.
Yeah.
Then the only notified body you can go to is a notified body that is still doing surveillance for products under old certificates. Okay. Then, of course, the question is, how are you going to know that? Because these scopes are, I think, not published. So they are published for the MDR, but I'm not sure. Are they published for the MDD? Yeah, they might actually. No, sorry, for the IVD it was new. No, they are published for the MDD. So you can also find out there. Still, of course, if I were on the other side working for a manufacturer that hates you as a distributor, I would say, no, this is not good enough. You need an MDR accredited notified body, but that's how the world sticks together these days with all these unclarities.
Yeah, no, I think we are really in a difficult period. It was already difficult, but now with all what is ongoing now, it starts to be more difficult. But as you've said, we can discuss also about that next week. We have another session about it. Mm-hmm. Okay, quick questions. Device check inbound. So, as distributor, for which medical device class should we track the UDI obligation in our system?
Well, I think Article 14 is pretty clear, because for the importer it says anyway that they need to check whether a UDI was designated, and I think it says the same for the distributor. Let me just double check that.
So mainly for the classes of device, all classes should have a UDI anyway. It's just the UDI carrier, some transition for the UDI carrier. So it can be not placed on the device itself for a certain period. It depends on the classification.
Correct. Yeah. I mean, because exactly Article 123 provides for a phase-in of UDI carrier placed on the device packaging. So yeah, I mean, then it's really simple. As a distributor, you need to track that, and that is also, I think, one of the things that you see in the MDR. That as a distributor, you need a lot of additional knowledge and market surveillance in order to get things right.
So yeah, so we have, for example, for a class 1, it's the carrier should be placed before May 26, 2025. For class 2 and 2B, May 26, 2023. For class 3, 2021, I think. So yeah, I think there is. I have to check again those dates, but this is mainly the time where you have to have a UDI for your product, but it's the carrier, so the label on it with the barcode later depends on the class of the device. So Article 123 is showing you all this. Check of the UDI. Okay, we also, I think, discussed about that during one of our podcasts. Following the information from the Belgian agency, we should verify that the UDI is available on each medical devices. Mm-hmm. How can this be done? Sampling to each inbound. Should we keep the proof of this check?
Yeah, so Article 14 says literally that the obligation to check whether a UDI has been assigned by the manufacturer can be done by sampling. It literally says that in Article 14.2. So how can this be done? By sampling. Easy. Nobody is against that. To each inbound device, you can also do that, but that's an importer obligation. So if you are a distributor, then you would need to be sure that it applies for every inbound device, and a distributor may sample. And also for an importer, there are ways to do it without having to open each box and visually inspect whether a UDI was assigned. Because you can make a software connection, perhaps with the manufacturer's SAP system, which admitted is much easier when the manufacturer is part of your own corporate group. But there are solutions for that, for the importer. But for the distributor, it's very easy. Just do sampling and make sure that you have an appropriate sampling plan, because that's, of course, what the MDR says, a sampling method that is representative of the devices supplied by that distributor. So you need to make a sampling plan that makes sense.
And should we record this check? So if we have a sampling plan with the different samples, so we have to say when we have checked and what we have checked.
Well, preferably, because if you don't, and I'm a competent authority, and I come and I say, how do you sample? Oh, whenever we feel like it. No, we have a fantastic plan. And I say, okay, show me your sampling plan. Well, it's all in my head. Yeah.
So a quality management system here is really important, that you are recording everything, having the right forms to check what you have checked, and that you can prove to other authorities that you have done it, and you have done it per your procedure or your sampling plan directly.
Yes, and I will tell you, I've had cases against competent authorities in situations like this. And of course, you can do this with minimal documentation. But the problem is that if you have an angry competent authority in your company that is going to give you a big fine, what they will do is they will look for the facts that confirm the contravention of the law, and then they will puzzle it together by the facts they can find. And then it's up to you to disprove that this has actually happened. So the better you document this stuff, the better you protect yourself against people saying that you haven't done it correctly. That's what a quality system should be about.
Yeah.
Document it so you can prove that it's been done.
Yeah, correct. Case study. So we have nearly the same thing, and now I think we have the answer from the previous thing, but let's make this case study for an importer obligation. So a question I have is on the interpretation of the importer's economic operator verification obligation. I noticed some difference in interpretation, whereas First, this verification should be done only on product level once and again after renewal of the certificate. Second, this verification should be done for each serial batch number you receive for this product. And three, this verification should be done for each single product. So as an example, you receive 3 shipments, 3 batches, and 300 pieces. So should it check only the fact that it has some electrodes, for example, so it's one time, or should it check each batch of each electrodes 3 times, or each product, so 900 times?
Yeah, this is a question that mixes up things because depending on the procedure that you have, what the MDR imposes is verification. And verification is something that you do intelligently according to a procedure. The MDR also requires that the conditions in Article 13 are true for each product that the importer places on the market. So then you can say, well, yeah, but there's a gap between that. Yes, exactly, because that's what verification is about. If you can verify without checking every single product, more power to you, and there are ways to do this. But that would, for example, mean that, and that's something that the article from Reps Focus that I wrote together with Agnes Shoboslai I refer to, we give solutions for precisely this problem in that article. Like, for example, what you can do is you can have a procedure with the manufacturer that says, I will only release products to you when I, as a manufacturer, have checked upon batch release for each product that all the conditions in Article 13, Section 2 are true. So, for example, I have clients that have their IT system set up in a way that the manufacturer can only ship products from the manufacturing site if basically the importer check has already happened. The importer will know, because that's the procedure that they've checked, that they've agreed with the manufacturer, and the importer will also regularly audit that the manufacturer actually does this. So that means that I think then you have a procedure of which you can say, I have verified this, that this is true for every product. Because, use your big brain, your big person brain, if you look at, for example, manufacturing of devices under a full quality system, that also doesn't require that you inspect the production quality for every medical device, right? It doesn't say that the notified body, for example, has to inspect the device, every finished device. And this works the same way. You set up procedures that are done in a way that they consistently lead to the outcome that is legally prescribed. And that's how you do it. The distributor has more freedom because the distributor does not need to have procedures that would consistently lead to this outcome, because the distributor can sample. It's another method, right? Because if you would just manufacture whatever you like and then sample, oh, does it sort of meet the type? That is not how we want devices produced, but that is how we are satisfied that a distributor checks whether the Article 14, Section 2 requirements are met.
No, I think it's clear. I think, we have to really have a quite system that is showing some sampling methods, showing how we are doing that, and showing also that by doing this method, we are pretty confident, 99%, if I can say, that everything is correct, because we still have the risk. We still take some risk, if I can say. One thing is about importer label. Should the importer label then, after this check, be placed on once? This means a pallet, if I can say, or 9 times because there is 3 batches, or 9 batches, or 900 times for each product.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, there's people that are doing so much close reading these days.
I think, because it's a lot of logistic also to place a label for each product one by one. So maybe they are trying to see if they can avoid to do that.
Yeah, so let's walk a bit back. So what does this importer declaration do? the importer declaration or the importer label says, importer, I am responsible for having checked that Article 13.2 is true, right? And that means that that the devices that I place on the market comply with the requirements that I had to check, right?
Yeah.
Placing on the market. The blue guide says placing on the market criteria happen on a per product basis. So what I say has to be true for each product, right?
Yeah.
So then you get into the situation that if I deliver products, then for which I have to, as an importer, provide this declaration that goes with the product, then the MDR says importers shall indicate on the device. Well, that's something that has to go not even every single batch, but every device. So that would not be 900 times, but 900 times X times, because you can put it on every device. Okay, so that is actually the requirement, right? So somebody down the supply chain that receives a device needs to be able to check who is the importer for this device. That's the requirement.
Because he's placing the device on the market, and it's only the role of a manufacturer or a distributor or an importer. So then, he has also to identify himself to say, I am the one who placed this device on the market.
Yeah, and that is how it works. It's if you are a competent authority and you fish a medical device out of the supply chain somewhere, you need to be able to establish who the importer is. If that's not possible, then the importer did not do their homework.
No, it's clear. So 900 times. So you have to place that on each product itself to really see the identification. So it's not.
Unless, of course, your products are delivered to the end user in a box that contains multiple devices. Let's say, for example, I have Band-Aids, right?
Yeah.
You're not going to put it on every Band-Aid, but for sure you're going to put it on every box that contains Band-Aids.
Yeah.
That's how it works.
No, it's clear. So you cannot avoid that. You have really to put that on each device.
Put it on a pallet that, we were talking Article 16 all the time, repacking. If you're in a situation that is not even repacking, but I have a distributor. The distributor receives a gigantic pallet of several cubic meters of devices. And that pallet has a single importer declaration on it. And the distributor says, okay, I'm going to sell half of this pallet to Romania, and I'm going to sell half of the other pallet to Bulgaria. Then what happens to the importer declaration? It's gone, right?
Yeah.
So that's not how it's supposed to work. And then you must that's why requirement is that the declaration goes with every box of the devices in which they reach the end user, I would say.
Yeah, agree. Okay, next one, let's go to EUDAMED a bit quickly. We are a bit late now. So EUDAMED, registration of economic operators, registration of manufacturers, representative, and importers. What are obligations after 25th of May 2020, since there is no EUDAMED?
I can hear Richard laughing with him not even being in this webcast. Well, we don't know. It's a really stupid answer, but remember the December council meeting where the Commissioner Kyriakides said, yes, we are going to clarify this. Guidance will be coming. Well, the joke's on us because no guidance has come so far. I
hope Richard has more information about that. But it's true that we are still waiting for more clarity. What should we do? There is this provision that says even if you are MDD, you have still to register economic operators, etc., on EUDAMED, but no EUDAMED until 2022. There is apparently also information that there is a bit of EUDAMED that will be released, and voluntarily you can use it to register things. So it's a bit mixed feeling here.
Yeah, there are two things here, because actually what we know is what we knew in December 2017 already. That's the CAMD FAQ that basically say when UDAMED happens not to be available by the date of application, then you have to meet the obligations that you would meet through UDAMED by means of the tools that the member states provide under the current system. So that means you have to work with what is there. That is
so you have to contact your member state then to see what is the rules that should apply during this time.
Yeah, and if you look at the joint implementation plan that recently came out of the MDCG, I think there was also last week. I also wrote a blog about that. That says we are still working on the guidance and on technical harmonization behind the scenes to make sure that this happens in an orderly fashion. So we don't know.
So just one thing, I just received here the comment from Richard Julian, who just said May 26, 2020, UDAMED will go live for economic operators to register.
Exactly.
So
yeah, that's a good point, because that's the famous voluntary use of the actor module.
Yeah,
which I also described in the blog about the joint implementation plan, and maybe Richard has information about that I don't have. But the problem is that what the Commission is going to do, as I understand it, but I'm sure Richard will correct me if it's wrong to save me from myself, is the Commission is going to make this available. But what we don't know is whether this voluntary use of the module is going to lead to a compliant registration that you can use going forward. So in other words, whether this is fun and play to practice, or whether this is something you can actually use and don't need to duplicate later. Why is this so important? Because the MDR says you are going to obtain an SRN from UDAMED, a single registration number. Each economic actor needs that interacts with the UDAMED database needs an SRN from UDAMED. And the way this works is that under normal circumstances, UDAMED would only generate an SRN when it is validated in the background by the competent authority that is responsible for the jurisdiction in which the SRN requested party is established. So let's say, for example, I am a Dutch manufacturer. I apply for an SRN. Then UDAMED will forward my SRN request to the Dutch authorities in the UDAMED backend. Then the Dutch authorities will need to basically tick a box, or however, what kind of interface they have with UDAMED, saying, yes, Erik is a bona fide company. Erik is a besloten vennootschap, a limited liability company under Dutch law. He is registered in the company's register, so we are sure Erik exists. Yes, Erik can have an SRN, and then UDAMED spits out an SRN for me, which I can use to interact with UDAMED. Fantastic. That's how it would go normally. But what we don't know is how this voluntary use is going to work, whether there will also be a validation of the SRNs by the member states. Because if the UDAMED database is going to generate unvalidated SRNs, that would be kind of useless, because you would not be able to use them afterwards unless you would have this kind of weird retrospective validation of issued SRN process, which I could imagine also happening, but that would be really inconvenient and we would know about it. But I'm going to stop here, because now I'm going to really go into speculation, and maybe Richard knows something.
So I just have the answer from Richard saying, my understanding is that the SRN is going to be issued by the voluntary registration. This is issued by UDAMED only after validation by the competent authority and/or authorized representative non-EU is completed.
Okay, so apparently there is going to be validation, which is fantastic, because that saves everybody a lot of work. But
Yeah.
I will tell you, I was under the impression that, or at least I wasn't sure about this, because this is not something that the Commission has said publicly.
Yeah, so it says it's not the SRN that is validated, it is the company that is validated, and then the SRN is auto-generated.
Exactly. But then,
as you said, the confirmation that this company exists and it's really a good company, is doing the job, and then when it's approved, validated, then it generates automatically the SRN number. So let's go to the last question of today. It was a long live. So the last question is about general obligation of distributors. Starting 26th of May 2020, we will have on the market mixed situations. So medical device compliance with directives, medical device compliance with regulation. Do we have this obligation only for medical device compliance with regulation? What is the sampling method? Since manufacturer cannot enter products in EUDAMED, does distributor has to register products in some way nationally?
Yeah, good questions. Well, do we have this obligation only for medical devices compliant with the regulation? Remember that we had this long discussion about the millions of dollars question that we can't answer at the moment.
Yeah.
Well, that's your answer to that question. What is a sampling method? Sampling method, that's a method representative of the devices, as the MDR says. So that means that you will need to put on your thinking cap and think about what is a representative method for these devices.
I suppose a statistic method will be really the best.
Exactly. I mean, if you are an MRI machines distributor, you need another sampling method than when you are a suture wire distributor, for example, or you do other high volume disposable devices, for example.
Yeah. So and we talked about also the registration of products in national way. So if EUDAMED is not available, so then
what to say about it, something about it, because it's a good question. Because what we tend to see now is that member states are getting quite impatient because EUDAMED is not going up, and they've made political promises about all devices being traceable. So you do see member states that are going to ask all kinds of national registrations in databases and what have you pending EUDAMED. So definitely, I think it's a good question, because I would say it's not that one depends on the other here. So the fact that the manufacturer cannot enter products in EUDAMED automatically causes that the distributor has to register nationally. But there may be member states that think it's very useful to make things even more interesting for the market by imposing additional administrative requirements. So, for example, in my country, the Netherlands, somebody had the fantastic idea to require that hospitals register every implantable device that they get in, or even broader. And then the hospital said, oh, manufacturers, that's great. You have to put every device that you supply to us in our database. Well, there you go. So, right? So there may be national requirements there, unfortunately, that will happen, that can have a specific use just because EUDAMED is not available. And again, in the last council meeting, Commissioner Karakides said, we will watch out that member states will not go all over the place with their own databases. But I don't think they're doing a very good job at that at the moment, because member states are saying, we need to trace this stuff.
So I think there is a lot of things that will arrive during this transition period, during this before and after date of application. The fact that EUDAMED is not live, the fact that we have still some products that will be MDD on the market, MDR coming, notified body not all available. I mean, it's a difficult time, if I can say. Not really. Not only for manufacturers, because we talked a lot about manufacturers saying that it will be difficult for them. But here today, we really discover also that distributors have also a lot of questions. Yep. And this is also something that can be a struggle for them to distribute the products on the market.
Yeah. I can only quote Immanuel Kant to you: "Dare to be wise." So make your own choices. Have good arguments for it, why they are compliant choices, and then go with it. That's the only thing. I mean, it's like they say in South Park, right? What would Brian Boitano do?
Yeah.
He'd make it, and he'd follow through.
Exactly.
So,
make a plan, make a scenario, and yeah, let's go through that. Okay, I think we covered a lot of the questions. I tried to check if there is some other question, but some of the questions that were raised were already answered. I will try to put the link to the HPRA guidance. I will review the comments and see if there is any other thing that I missed, but I think we really covered everything. So thank you everyone for being there.